Well, before we get too caught up, let me introduce the show. Welcome, Adam KAGAN, to SergeThaPurge. I'm glad to have you because I looked at your IMDb and all your credits, and there's so much shit. I literally had to make a list of it. Like, I've never had to do that for any guests, so I'm just like, oh shit, man.
Right.
I'm like trying to remember everything to talk about. And I'm like, what the fuck? I don't even know. I'm like, where to start with this shit. And then on top of that, to introduce you and to all the guests and all the people that watch the show, Adam KAGAN is the only guy I've met in a while that I've seen wearing new shoes and a new watch every day of the week. I've seen him.
I only need 5 of those to impress you. Five watches and 5 pairs of shoes.
Yeah, I think anytime I had a class with you at MI, it was a new watch. And me and Kevin, you remember Kevin? He would,
Sure.
we would talk about that shit. He'd be like, dude, I think Adam's got different shoes on today, man.
Shoes, I don't know. Watches. I have a lot of watches. But not
Yeah,
a
you
lot
definitely had a lot of watches. I remember that shit, man. I don't know, man. You don't talk about anything. You're a real humble dude, man. It's commendable.
No, they're not expensive watches.
Oh shit, you still got more watches than I have.
Like I say to people, it's like mic preamps. If you buy one a year, you can have a lot eventually.
Yeah, exactly. After like 20 years, you got like 20 preamps. You almost got a whole console. You do almost a whole record.
You see pictures of Michael Brower and Manny Marroquin in their studios, and you go, wow, they got so much pieces of gear. Well, if you buy one a year, and you've been mixing for 50 years, you want a lot of gear.
Fair enough, man. I have this Studio Master 642. It's like a 16-channel console, completely analog. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's not really that crazy. I think it sells
like a 80s era, or is it a new one?
It's 80s, real old. Yeah, I even actually have to fix some of these channels because some of them are buzzing. But I don't know. That's my only flex.
That's the thing. In Nashville, everybody's got to have one small analog console in their studio.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, I figured as long as you have a console for clients to look at, it looks like you're doing something,
Exactly.
rather than everyone now just has a studio with like an interface and some outboard gear. So I'm like, all right, well, if we have a console, I can kind of compete here.
Right. Yeah, a few years ago, I had those Pro Control Avid control surfaces.
Right.
It was like 16 faders, and it was built into an Argosy console. And I took everything out of the console and I built racks. So all my gear
nice.
sits in the desk. So I still got the desk in front of me, but there's no faders. It's all just outboard gear.
Oh, nice.
So it looks kind of more like a mastering console, but it's
Oh,
that
that's
way
tight.
I still sit in front of a big piece of furniture when people come in.
Yeah, exactly, man. Well, let me ask: are you originally from Los Angeles, or when did you move? What's the deal?
I moved to LA in the mid '90s. It was like the day after the big Northridge earthquake.
Oh wow!
I was living in Chicago at the time.
And where are you originally from? Chicago?
I grew up in Chicago. I went to school in Miami in Florida, and then I
Nice.
moved back to Chicago for a few years, and then I moved to LA shortly after that.
And what made you move to LA?
I was when I was working in Chicago, I started working for a record company, and I partnered up with a songwriter producer, and we were doing records in Chicago. And we came out with a friend of ours who had been signed in Chicago, a singer. We came to LA with him on a trip while he was recording his first record, and met a bunch of producers and writers who all wanted to work with us, or said they wanted to work with us. So that was it. We just threw our shit in the car and drove out of here.
Man, that's like the story with everyone, man.
So yeah, it was $300 in a Honda Civic and drive out to LA.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much everyone's story I've ever heard. It's like, yeah, I came here and then just ended up staying. The weather's nice and people are a lot of fucking rock stars and shit hanging around.
Yeah, I mean, LA and Nashville are pretty much it. When I moved to LA, it was sort of like LA and New York were the two places to be if you wanted to be doing like pop music,
right?
Top 40 kind of stuff. And then New York quickly fell away, especially after 2001, after 9/11. New York kind of disappeared from the radar for commercial music.
That's what I've heard actually from quite a few people, that New York City is no longer a big music hub for anything.
It's still, I mean, it's big, but it's more Broadway and
Yeah, like
classical music and jazz.
performance
Yeah,
arts and jazz. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Chicago's a big music town too, though, isn't it?
It's huge. It's just not a good studio and production town.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people, you know, Steve Albini's still in Chicago. Brad Wood was from Chicago, but he's in LA now. There was kind of like the post-grunge kind of movement really hit Chicago, and there were a lot of big groups coming out of there and some of the
Right.
90s rock. But it's a big live music scene, but kind of not a good music business world there.
I got you.
It's
So
so
when you moved to LA though, what was the goal? Because were you already engineering at that point, or was it just like I just want to come here to make something happen?
when I was in Chicago, so I graduated school, I got out of school, and I started doing live sound gigs and engineering stuff. And it was right at the beginning of the Pro Tools had just come out, right? This is around 1991.
Right.
Pro Tools had just come out, and small multi-track recorders were available, analog recorders like the old Tascams and stuff. So the successful musicians had small home studio setups, at least like writing setups.
Right.
But in Chicago, there wasn't a lot of that. But there were. I got my way into kind of the studio world in Chicago with songwriters and other people in that world who were making a living doing that. And then I ran into a friend I went to high school with, and he was working on a record for himself, and he had management, and he had sort of a benefactor who was funding him.
Okay.
And he said, "Hey, do you want to build a studio?" So we wound up renting an apartment building in a high-rise downtown Chicago and building out a studio.
Nice.
So we had like a 16-track analog studio. We had Pro Tools. We had 30 analog synths and a pretty big, it was a Tascam console, but it was like a Pro Studio console at the time.
Wow.
And we were doing my partner's record, and we were kind of co-writing it, co-producing it, and working on that 20 hours a day and meeting other artists. So we had been there for maybe, and during that process, we met a record company, a dance record company in Chicago called ID Records that was doing all the big remixes, like house remixes.
Right.
And at that time, they were doing Michael Jackson and INXS and Janet Jackson, and like they were getting $250,000 a remix kind of remixes.
Holy crap.
And so we worked with them. We moved our studio into one of their rooms for a while. And we were kind of in-house producers, but still working on my partner's record. And There was around that time that we came out to LA and we met some other artists and producers who wanted to work with us. We were working on, it was funny that nobody says this anymore, but there was a style of music in Chicago they called churban, and it was like urban crossover.
Wow.
And that was kind of like the dance urban side of music in the early 90s. It wasn't like New Jack was kind of dying, house music was there, and there was kind of like the middle of the road urban and pop stuff, and this was kind of the edgier urban pop stuff. And it was kind of a newer sound than LA was into. LA was still like straight David Foster pop music.
Right.
So when we came to LA, we had like just hundreds of tracks that we had amassed that we were producing and developing ourselves. So when we came to LA, we weren't planning on anything. On our first trip, we were just kind of hanging out with a friend of ours who had a record deal. And one of the producers that we met with liked our stuff and said, I want to do a record with you guys, a co-produce a record with you guys.
Wow.
So we also happened at that same trip, we met a guy who was living in LA who had a studio in his house right on Sunset at the top of the hills. And he had some empty rooms in his house. And he said, "Hey, if you guys want to come and merge our studios and have a place to live, come on out." So it was a pretty deal. Yeah, it was a pretty ideal moment. And we moved out here, and we spent the first couple months working with this writer-producer on his record. So we were writing and producing. And at the same time, so this is 1994, that was like the turning point where Pro Tools was a 16-channel system at this point.
Right.
And Logic was available, and there was another program called Studio Vision that was kind of similar to Logic. Cubase was popular, and songwriters were starting to buy their own computers and equipment and stuff. And at this point, I'd had my own system for 3 or 4 years. So the producers and writers that we started working with, I would also wind up working with building their studios and helping them learn how to use their equipment and teach them how to set up a microphone and a mic preamp and treat the room acoustically and stuff. So kind of half of my work was like demo production and engineering, and half of my work was working with my partner on his record. And then we started working with other artists. And almost immediately when we got to LA, we met another friend who was from LA who had an artist he was working with, really great R&B singer. And we started working with him just in the evenings, writing songs with him and recording songs.
Wow.
And within maybe 2 or 3 months of being in LA, we got a record deal for him.
Wow. Jeez.
So,
it like took off for you quick.
Yeah. And then right away, so we were here we moved out here in February, and by the end of that next year, we were in New York working on a record with this artist that we had signed to A&M. So we spent 4 months in New York making a record, living in Long Island.
Oh, it sounds amazing.
But still with our home base in LA. And that kind of opened the door into us working with tons of record companies and management companies, and that got us kind of moving as a production team.
Yeah.
So we were kind of at that point like busy writing and producing for other artists, and kind of left my partner's record behind.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I would imagine, man, if you're getting other people deals and stuff. I mean, were those deals were tied into your deal, or you were tied into their deal when you were doing all that stuff, or getting production points, or what was it?
Yeah, exactly. So we were producers. So the first artist that we got signed was signed to us as a production company. And then when you sign, at that time, we signed him to A&M. So he signed a deal with A&M. We signed as producers for the record. But then once you're in the door at a record company as a writer-producer, then they're all of a sudden like, hey, we have these other artists who need songs. We have these other artists who need songs.
Yeah, and it just goes.
And they start feeding you records. So we started working on lots of other records at the time.
Oh,
so
wow.
It kind of took off pretty fast. We were only, like I said, we were in LA less than a year before we had like our first artist signed.
Jeez, man. I mean, I feel like the industry's changed so much, man. You can't do that now. I mean, you can, but it's like, that's like really hard to do. You got to like be grounded over here.
Yeah. It's, there's more opportunity and less opportunity. It's that whole tail of the comet thing where there's a million people who can release music now.
Yeah.
But the chunk of money-making artists is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's reflected in record company deals and publishing deals, and it's a different world for sure.
So shit, man. Yeah. What was the artist you were working with? Did they was it just a one-off single, or was it like?
We did an album with him. It's unfortunate. It's a typical artist story. We went to New York. We did a record for him. We finished it around Christmas, a little after Christmas, came back to LA to kind of regroup. And then our plan was to go back to New York in, March or something and finish mixing the record.
Right.
And during that time, the artist went to live with his father in Southern Illinois or something. He was living in San Diego at the time, but he went back to visit his family and got hooked up with crystal meth and wound up beating up his girlfriend and going to jail for like 20 years.
Oh my, jeez.
So I've never heard from him again. I assume he moved.
Wow. And that was the first one. That was the first one ever in LA.
Yeah, and it was a tragic story, but for us, it opened the door into working on a bunch of artists for A&M Records, getting a publishing deal, getting the right management, who managed us, and getting a law firm that represented us, and really opening the doors to other artists. And as soon as we got back to LA, even before all the disasters happened at the beginning of that year, we started, working with a lot of big songwriters, or songwriters at least, who we thought were big, and getting songs on other artists. So that kind of launched our career as writer producers at that point.
Oh, wow, man. Oh, yeah, you definitely had like a hell of a fucking career from the start, man. Shit.
And fortunately for me, like even if we were slow, because in the as a as a producer, you can only produce so many songs a year, right? Especially if they have live players and stuff. So you're talking about doing, we wrote a lot. We would write a couple songs a week for pitching for placement on artists and stuff. But as far as production goes, if you can get 10, major label songs a year, that's a lot of work. So there's a lot of still like, okay, next week we don't have anything scheduled. And for me, I could still go to the people who I built studios for, and they still needed work from helping them record demos, helping them mix their demos, helping them mix the records when they started working on real records with those demos and stuff. So it led my way. Kind of, I was working two paths. One was as an independent engineer and mixer, and one as a producer, part of this production team.
So did you end up splitting off though from the production team?
I did. It was around 2002. We kind of went our separate ways.
It was just you had like enough clientele at that point. It didn't really matter for you to be a partner.
It wasn't deliberate on my part. It was more my partner wound up inheriting a bunch of money.
Oh, okay, nice.
And he kind of was like, "Yeah, I'm going to Brazil for the rest of the year. I'm going to So it was kind of like, I'm sitting here doing all the work anyways. Let me just start my own thing."
Okay, I gotcha.
So at that point, it was more like we split the company because he loved being in the music business, but he didn't love doing the work anymore.
I gotcha.
And so I started doing
going.
more. And at that point, it was kind of like the music business changed, like I said, after 9/11, and it was no fun to sit and write songs every day and try to get them placed, because the business side of the record companies was mostly in New York in the early 90s. And then by 2000, it had kind of dissolved on the East Coast and was kind of refining itself on the West Coast. But in the meantime, there was a lot of, like from 2001 to 2003, there was a lot of confusion and a lot of instability in the record industry.
Interesting.
So for me, the stability was mixing, and I could find a song a day to mix rather than getting a production done.
Yeah.
So it was much better for me. I built my own studio in Universal City, and I started just doing mixing in my own room and some artist development stuff, but I wasn't like actively so much pitching productions for outside artists.
Okay.
I would develop some artists, and I had a company that I worked with where we developed 1 or 2 artists a year to get them record deals.
Right.
And then in the meantime, just sitting in my room mixing records. So I was kind of, I was living in quarantine way back then.
I used to live in Universal City, actually. That's a nice spot, man.
Yeah, I had a spot right on Barham.
I used to live off Barham. Which was it an apartment?
No, I was in it's a commercial building. There's a talent agency. It was like a theatrical agency and a book agency.
Yeah.
And they leased the first floor to me.
Wow.
And so it was like, and Universal City was on the hillside, so I was kind of underground.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really cool spot for a studio because the walls were like the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty big room, but it had no sound problems because it was like a cave, literally.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's kind of a weird little strip there. Universal City's not very big at all. But that sounds like a nice spot. I think Eddie Van Halen lives over there, doesn't he?
There's tons of people. Madonna lives up there. William Shatner lives up there.
They all live like right off Barham, man. It's crazy. That's a good spot.
Lake Hollywood is kind of just like Toluca Lake. It's one of those little kind of small neighborhoods nobody really knows about, but it's nice houses. It's secluded, but it's in the city.
That's true. No one ever knew what Toluca Lake was when I used to tell them I lived there. Although I know Dweezil Zappa lived pretty close to me over there, and there's a lot of good famous people living over in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that was the baller place to live, like in the 1930s and 40s. Like that was
really,
with the equestrian center on that side of Griffith Park over there. There's like the horse ranches and stuff.
Yeah, that was nice, man. Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, but when did you end up doing? Well, I guess more. Well, I know when you ended up doing it. I think it was like 1996 when that song came out. But when did you end up, or how did you end up getting the gig doing like all the Tupac shit? And
that was through my management. Some of it was through my management company. My management company. So one of the first projects when we got our artist signed to A&M, the first thing the president of A&M, who was this guy named Al Cafaro at the time, said is, who's your manager? Right. And we were in LA for 3 days. We're like, manager, what's that? So he said, well, here's some people.
Wait, this happened 3 days in?
Not literally 3 days, but
okay.
3 months. It was quick, right?
Wow, dude, that is quick.
And that's a whole nother story. Like, it was just happened to be, we were going to Gold's Gym to work out like every day. And that was happened to be the place where all the record executives were going. And we cornered one of them one day and just said, hey, you got to listen to this cassette of our artist. And that's how the record deal came about. But so he said, you need a manager? So we said, okay, we don't know any managers. And he said, okay, here's a list of 5 guys you should call.
Wow.
So we called all these managers, met with them. We liked this one particular manager. And then he said, who's your attorney? Attorney? What's that? Oh, we got to get an attorney. So he said, here's a list of a couple of attorneys. So we basically interviewed some attorneys and said, here's the guy we like. Met with him, wound up doing a deal with this attorney. And then now we had a team like kind of representing us and helping us step forward. So my management company they had been around a long time as artist management, but they were getting into managing producers and mixers. And the other mixer that they represented was Manny Marroquin, just at the beginning of his career.
Wow.
So he had just done Monica, and they met him through Solshock and Carlin, who were producers who were signed to them, these Danish producers who were doing Tupac and Whitney Houston and a lot of that big R&B records.
Yeah.
So when Manny was busy or needed something tracked that he didn't want to do, luckily my manager would be like, hey, I got another guy on the roster. Let me call this guy.
Shit.
So some of it came about through that. And then even more than the management, just working with different writers and producers in our own camp, started getting like, hey, can you come help us track this record? You know, can you?
And that's what you were doing for that? Was it tracking or mixing for Dear Mama?
A little of both. I mean, that was done. Solshock and Carlin, the producers who did that stuff, did most of their work, production and mixing. They were like DJs and musicians, and they had a studio in Hollywood next to Sunset Sound, and they would do most of their work in their studios. So most of that work was done in their studios, and they like to have, an engineer around while they were working, because the stuff they were doing was keeper stuff, even though it was their private studio. And Manny was their mixer. That's how Manny kind of blew up, was because their productions were blowing up. So he was the guy. He was like the mixer for all their stuff, and I was just kind of the helping out guy.
Oh shit. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, because I remember you saying what was some story about, like, because everyone's new to having like hard drives, right, in the 90s and stuff.
Exactly.
So that you're saying what do? They like pinned them all down to a fucking a board, and they like, what do they like bolted them all to a board and bring them into,
they have
those
the Kensington locks for like computers and hard drives. They would put those locks on them, which is like a cable that attaches to them.
Right.
And they would bring like the Tupac's bodyguard or security guy's mother's security guy would bring a hard drive to the studio, plug in the FireWire cable, and then lock the hard drive to like a keyboard stand. And then he would go and sit in the lobby the whole day. And wait until we were done working at 2 a.m, and then he would come and unlock the hard drive and take it with him and leave. Not that they had no clue that anybody could take the data that was on the hard drive and move it to our computer, but there were funny moments where this didn't happen in LA, but when I was in Chicago, when we were working with this record company, we had been there for maybe a year or so, and the chief engineer at that record company said, when we were ready to leave, he said, okay, I just need you guys to erase your hard drive, because we were doing remixes and working on projects for them. Right. And I said, you need me to erase my hard drive? He goes, yeah, I want you to erase it right in front of me. Oh. So I literally like took the hard drive and threw it in the trash. And I was like, okay, I erased it. And he's like, okay, great, thanks.
Oh, and
he walked out of the room.
Jeez. What a moron.
Just open the trash, you pull everything back out. So it's not that we're trying to steal any files from anybody, but it's not, people didn't realize even today, well now, I guess today now people realize it more, but the digital files are so easily shared, borrowed.
No, totally. That's insane. Well, I think I've heard a lot of stories like that from before people like really knew anything about like digital recording, like people would be talking about stuff like that where it's like, okay, I need you to, now erase the session. It's like, all right, unplug the hard drive. Cool, man, it's done. Like you don't know any better,
But even the at that same time, when we were in Chicago, they were doing remixes for Michael Jackson, and we had all the, like for the song Jam, we had all the 2-inch tapes, and they were copies from his master 2-inch tapes. And they send them over to the studio. And the first thing we do is copy all the tapes to another tape, just a backup copy, just in case. You don't want to work on the master tape while we're running the tape for hours and hours and hours every day. So we had copies of all those tapes, and I sampled all the drums and horns and guitar riffs off of those records, and the original tapes. So there's no way to protect. I mean, you shouldn't need to protect it from your own team. But even like 2010, 11, I was working. When I was at Nightbird Studios, we did the Michael Jackson, the Immortal was the Cirque du Soleil show.
Nice.
So remixes of all the Michael Jackson hits. And the same thing, all the tapes have been transferred to Pro Tools, or they were working in Digital Performer on them at the time. And every day, the Michael Jackson or Cirque du Soleil team would bring in a suitcase full of hard drives and plug in the hard drives and lock them up and then leave.
Jeez. Wow,
and it was the same thing going. Like our whole studio was hooked up to a server. Like we could copy anything from any computer anywhere.
Yeah, it totally defeats the purpose.
That if we don't let you keep that hard drive, I guess that's the best we could do.
Well, that was you actually beat me to it, because that was the next thing I was going to ask is about how you ended up getting that gig at Nightbird. If you were doing, I mean, because everything you were doing was all just on your own, kind of like connects and stuff. And then you ended up getting a steady gig there, right? For a while.
So I'd never worked at a studio like as a staff engineer assistant. Like I never did that route. I was always the producer, engineer, mixer who would book a studio as a client. So around 2006 or 7, I had some projects I was working on, and the artist I was working with had booked a session at Nightbird. It was in the Sunset Marquis Hotel, and I was down there working, and I was there for 4 or 5 days working with this artist, and I had met the owner and I'd met the studio manager and just been hanging out. There's always time to hang out at the studio.
Right.
And while I was there, the former chief engineer and the owner got into it about something, and it was time for the former engineer. He had been thinking about moving, and turned out it was a good time for him to leave.
Right.
And so the owner of the studio basically said to me, like, hey, are you interested in working here?
Okay. And you were like, you took the gig.
Yeah, because the clientele was really good. I had my own clientele already.
Yeah, I saw the roster. It is really good clientele, man.
Yeah. The studio
they did like
private,
the Drake record there, or parts of the Drake record. I know they do.
Yeah, 2
vocals.
Drake records. We did like that first year I was there. It was like CeeLo, Drake.
Yeah, Taylor Swift, I think, is on that roster too.
Yeah, Taylor Swift works there. It's because it's super private studio. Like you don't. It's not like most studios in LA.
A hotel, right?
It's in the basement of a hotel, and there's an entrance to the building that's on the next block.
Oh,
that you can drive underground to get to the hotel, so the paparazzi can't get in there. So we did, Kanye's Dark, Beautiful, Twisted Fantasy record, and
the whole thing.
Most of the vocals were cut there. Yeah. I mean, he has track guys all over the world, but most of the vocals and production were done there.
Wow.
We worked with, Madonna would come in the studio, Elton John would come in the studio, Aerosmith would come in the studio. Like it's a pretty big, there's a few studios that kind of attract a really high-end clientele, and the studio owner also is a well-known musician, and he's buddies with Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top and Jeff Beck, and he's friends with those guys for decades, so they all come and hang out at the studio. So
yeah, I remember I wanted to intern there like way back when I first got done with MI, and I remember getting a mass text from them that was like, okay, we have 80 applicants today, just today. Like this is the whole week. We have 80 applicants each day, so we're gonna just have you guys stand in a line or something like outside what was it? It was like we're we're gonna have you. Yeah, it was like we were gonna have you guys stand in a line outside, some place, and we're just gonna call you, and we're just gonna interview you for like 5 seconds and then let you go and decide. And I was like, holy shit! There's like, there's no way.
You hit a bad moment. When I was there, we would basically call like 20 applicants
Yeah.
at a time, and probably 10 or 12 would actually show up. And we would basically say, like, if you look like you bathed in the last couple of days and you have a copy of your driver's license with you, you got a job or an internship. And because most interns don't show up this first day, and many of them don't show up the second day, because it's an unpaid job. If that area, especially in West Hollywood on Sunset's really hard to park.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would park, they'd be running late, they'd park somewhere, go out, their car was towed or they got a ticket or whatever, and they're like, screw that, I'm not going back there.
Oh man.
So there was a lot of just flakiness.
Well, I feel like I learned pretty quick because I did end up interning at another big studio. Well, I would say maybe it wasn't big. It was probably more medium because they didn't really attract that kind of clientele. It was more of like the Warped Tour scene bands, like hardcore bands and shit. So I was like interning there for like honestly a couple days. And I remember like just realizing like, why am I interning? I could just be making money off this shit. And then I fucking just like quit. And then that's why I got into live shit. Because I was like, why the fuck am I interning, man? Like I could just buy all this equipment off doing live gigs and then build my own shit.
Well, if you got it like that, it's one. No, it's a different world. I would have to say today, selling someone on an internship is kind of tough because everybody has a studio on their computer. Yeah. Everybody can do things on their own. And even like right now I work at Chalice Studios kind of part-time, and we have 3 SSL rooms, 200 input SSL-Js and a vintage SSL-G+.
Nice.
And the assistants and the engineers who work there have never used an analog console.
Really?
There's 2 faders up on the board for the output of Pro Tools.
Oh my!
And there's a lot of beautiful outboard gear, and the rooms are super vibey and nice. And there's gated parking for 12 cars, and it's restrooms for everybody. It's a nice spot to hang out. But as far as interning goes, up until the last decade or so, you needed to learn the process of how studios are run, whether you had your own home studio or not. Yeah. These days, we all have a computer as growing up, right? We all grew up with our studio in front of us. So learning the studio is more watching YouTube videos, and the idea of a mentorship, unless you're doing live music. In live music, the mentorship, live sound is a much better learning experience of how bands work and how instruments work and what breaks and how things get plugged in the right way than in the studio. The studio is such a controlled, simple environment compared to live sound.
Everything's like, I feel like I didn't even really know my signal flow as well as I thought I did until I got into doing live shit. And it was like, oh shit, man, I got to redo this entire setup again,
Yeah. You do one thing backwards in live sound and the show doesn't go on.
Yeah.
In the studio, it's just like, well, everybody go get a cup of coffee. Let me figure this out. When you have 20,000 people at a concert, that doesn't happen.
Well, and I feel like live also really got my mixes good. Like I was not a very good mixer at all until I started doing live shit, and it was like, I think part of it is just because it forced me to get a good mix really fast. And like now I go to the studio and it's like, what the fuck? I just did a mix the other day and I was like, man, this shit's like, I haven't mixed in a while either. And I did it. I sent it to a couple buddies and they were like, dude, this is really good. And I'm like, I did it in like 4 hours. And I just remember like a time when it was like before that, when it'd take me like, fucking days to do a mix, to even do a bounce and think it might be okay. And this one's like, and now it's like, okay, yeah, this is passable. Like maybe just do some cool shit and it's done, And
when you're doing live sound, you have half of the first song to get it sounding good for a band you've never worked with before.
Yeah, pretty much, man. It keeps you on your feet. Although I think
it's a little different though, because I don't think I've ever had a record to mix that only had 16 channels.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it did for me too. Is it simplified all my thought processes on like studio shit? Because I was just like, man, I don't even have time to like now go and how many delays am I doing on this one vocal, or like this chain I'm doing here. Like, why am I doing this? Like, maybe like question, like, why am I doing all this shit when I could just fucking not?
Right.
You know?
You're right. You're like, the police live don't need that. Why do I have to do that in the studio?
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I'm just, yeah, it's what yeah, exactly. It's a thought too. I'm like, what can I make the most of this situation out of all the simplicity that I have now? I don't know. It's changed my perspective, I guess.
but getting back to the interning thing, like interning, if you are lucky enough to intern at a studio like Record Plant or the Village Recorders or one of these studios like that has a new A+ client coming in every day, you meet their producers and their arrangers and their track guys and their assistant engineers, and that's a good way to get working. There's a lot of success stories out of engineers and assistants who worked at Record Plant and at Larrabee and those kind of places. That there's only a few of those places around anymore, though.
Yeah, like the top 5, really. I feel like it, because I even noticed with Record Plant, they list their interns on their website and stuff. Like most places, they don't even want you to know they have interns.
Right. Yeah, Record Plant, you intern by working at another studio until the owner of that studio calls Rose and says, this guy's good enough to work for you guys now, or this guy's
really
growing bigger than us, you should take him over. And it's because Record Plant's known as like the launch pad for, engineers to take it to that next level.
Yeah.
But still, what's missing in the studio world that I caught the tail end of, luckily, was just the idea of, I go to mix a record that I produced and I'm working at Record Plant in Studio 1, and Dave Pensato's in Studio 2, and John Gass is in Studio 3, and Manny American's in Studio 4, and we all hang out and have lunch together.
That's pretty nice.
They're like, what are you working on? What are you working on? Hey, what are you running? You guys have one of those. I never saw this compressor before. Is there one of those in your studio? And then, Pensato would be like, oh, come check it out. I've got mine plugged in on the vocal. And you go in and he would show you what he's doing with it. And then he would walk in the room and say, what are you guys working on? And, it was those guys, or even people that, you might never heard of, but they're working on cool records. And you're just in that world where the guy next door is doing something interesting, and the guy next door is doing something interesting. And somebody knocks on the door and goes, hey, you have any sounds for an MPC? We rented an MPC. We don't have any sounds. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got my zip drive here or whatever. And it was a much more kind of collegial hang of a studio time.
Wow.
And you have that in school, right? Or you had that in school. And we kind of have that by watching YouTube. You can watch, Warren Hart or Dave Pensato or anybody doing their thing, but it's not quite the same as going, like, feeling the energy in the room when they play something back and go, like, listen to this.
Yeah.
And then they play it back and you're like, I get that. Let me go in my room and try to find that.
Yeah. No,
so that's a little bit missing in the world. So not that it's been replaced, and it's been, I think it's quicker to learn. If you want to learn how to use a piece of gear, you could watch a YouTube video in 30 seconds and be like, oh, I get it. You turn the knobs this way. As opposed to like walking from room to room at Larrabee going like, hey, anybody know how to recall a preset on this box from the 80s?
Man.
And then finding the right person who knows it.
That sounds like a time, though, man. I mean, it's probably much more organic then doing that kind of stuff than now. It's just like, let me just YouTube everything. You don't even have to think for yourself,
Yeah. And like I said, I caught the tail end of it because I was happy to, by 2002, I was locked in my own room.
Oh, man.
And working in the box, in Pro Tools. I had, a good amount of outboard gear, but it was really, I was confident that I was making records in Pro Tools that were competing with records that were done in analog studios.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, you said you moved in 91, so you kind of like the back end of tape too then, right?
Yeah, I own a 24-track tape machine, and I never enjoyed working on tape. Like, there's things I do like about the sound of tape, but I never liked working on it, because if you're recording, imagine recording a vocalist like, I won't mention any names, but any modern trap artist, right? Because the way like a trap record, the way a lot of vocals are done is, okay, punch me in after that line, let me make up the next line, right? Punch me in after that line, let me make up the next line. Right. And in a DAW, it's really easy to put the cursor down and hit spacebar.
Yeah, but in tape, you got to cut that tape, shit.
You're like, well, you don't have to cut it, you have to roll back, find the place to punch in. So be like, okay, let me find my punch in spot, Let me listen to what you just said. You can't look at the waveform. And just the rewind time, every time you hit rewind and go back to the beginning of the verse, 15, 20 seconds goes by.
Yeah, and all the
So
creativity is like dying probably.
in a way, yes, it's not a stream of consciousness, but in another way, it gives a good singer a minute to take a breath and think about what they just did and then set up for the next pass.
Right.
You know, it's not like loop record. Okay, I'll give you 8 verses. And it
Yeah.
just keeps looping through those 8 verses. Like you get 8 takes down, as opposed to an artist singing through it, going like, okay, while they're rewinding for the next minute, I can think about what I did right and wrong in my head, and I'll give me another track. So
Right.
the pacing, in a sense, is slow, but in another sense, it might be better for the creative flow, or at least
Okay.
for the production flow. But doing a vocal on a singer who's a capable but not amazing singer on analog tape,
Oh
recording a
yeah.
lead vocal was an 8-hour to 2 days experience. Where
Wow.
today you're like, if you can't cut a vocal in 2 hours,
Yeah, you're done.
and let me just go in and melodyne it, then it's not a fun day.
Yeah. No, it's
So
yeah, well, yeah, because then you don't even have melodyne, so you have to sing everything in tune. It's like that's like
yeah,
unheard of now.
there were records. I mean, plenty of records. I remember artists crying, like
Wow.
like a young artist coming in the studio the first time and going like, "That was sharp. Let's sing that line again. Okay, let's punch in that last word. Let's try that again." And the
Oh,
40th time, they forget why they're even doing it, right? And then they just start crying. And then you're like, okay, let's take a break and let's get back in. You know, and a lot of psychology just going like, your performance is awesome. You're just sharp, and I can't fix that. There's no, and there's always been ways to tune vocals since vocal tuning probably started in the 70s. Like there wasn't
okay.
auto tune and Melodyne, but there were AMS pitch shifters and Eventide, and there were samplers, and
Right.
on digital tape machines you could vary speed and change the pitch of things. So there was always ways to tune, but it was expensive and time consuming.
Okay.
So it was much better to try to get the performance out of the artist. And you didn't know necessarily if you could tune a vocal. Like today you can record monitoring auto tune and go like, oh,
Yeah.
that was close enough. I know I can spend 5 minutes and really get that in shape.
Yeah.
But back then it was like, I don't know if that's close enough. Let's keep trying.
Oh, that sounds
So
awful, man.
so yeah, if you know anyone who wants a MCI tape machine, I've got one in my garage.
Yeah. I don't even. How much is a tape machine now worth?
You have to pay someone to take it away.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's worth more in parts. I mean, there are companies who sell refurbished. Like there's a company in, I think they're in Nashville. They might be in Austin, called Mara Machines, that refurbishes analog MCI analog tape machines, and they
Okay.
like restore them to factory new, and they're beautiful, great sounding machines. But tape is expensive. You could buy a really nice refurbished original condition 24-track tape machine for $5,000 to $10,000 in great condition.
Okay. Fair enough.
But it's a commitment. You have to know how to tune it up yourself. You have to know how to align it. You have to know how to take care of it. You have to know someone who knows more than you, so they can tell you, like at 2 a.m. when your tape is not running right, when you hit stop and it doesn't stop,
Yeah.
you have to know somebody who can be like, oh, open this and reseat this connector and plug it back in, and you should be good to go until a tech can come and fix your machine.
Oh, jeez.
So it's a
Yeah.
little bit, like even the console you have, or the consoles we have at Chalice, which are, the G series console at this point is almost 40 years old.
Oh, wow.
So having somebody who can come in and divine what's wrong with the board like that is
Yeah.
really important.
And that
And
studio's like up and running still, Chalice? While
yeah, it's
all
super
this
busy.
stuff.
Yeah,
Really?
it's Rihanna and Willow Smith and Migos, and yeah, it's a very busy studio.
Wait, Migos are still around? I thought they were done. I thought it was just Quavo or whatever
Yeah, the
doing it.
Migos is still doing their thing, but yeah, they the studio is super busy, and even through the pandemic, they've still been booked out every day.
Wow,
So they've
man.
got 3 rooms rocking there 7 days a week.
Oh, good for you, man. That sounds like a solid gig.
Yeah, I don't work a lot of sessions there. I kind of help out with the staff, and I do some maintenance stuff and help them set up and tune their rooms, and
Nice.
I'm like the old man mentor there now.
Fair enough,
Which
man.
is nice because I could go in, I could do my own work at my own studio and then go in there once a week, twice a week, and have fun working on the old analog gear. And I don't need to stay up all night long tracking.
And you do a lot of post-production too, right?
I wouldn't say a lot. I do maybe 1 or 2 film projects a year that might take a few months.
Okay,
so
yeah, because I saw a couple there on IMDb that I'm like, dude, like I literally pulled that up today and I was like, I searched Adam KAGAN IMDb and I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, obviously I have the wrong guy. And then I go back because I'm just like, because I like didn't know you did all, like you never talk about all the film shit you did. I'm like, all right, I didn't know Adam did this much shit. So I go back and I do another search and I'm like, all right, Adam KAGAN IMDb, and then your picture pops up. I'm like, what the fuck? You done all those fucking movies too, man? I saw like Rio on there, like you did all those animation and fucking a bunch of shit, man.
Yeah, Rio was, I worked with Tayo Cruz on a song for that, so that was a music part of that. So that was
okay.
I didn't work on the film side of it. It was, I mean, like Fox came in for the session. They flew in these drummers from Brazil to play drums on this track, and we did that. That was when I was at Nightbird, but it was a song for the movie. A lot of the other films on there, I've either mixed or done sound design or some kind of editorial for the film.
Okay.
But those are so time consuming that it's not often worth it to do that. But I do like 5.1 mixing for films and try to do a couple indie films a year.
Okay, nice.
Sometimes turn into nice projects. I've had a couple indie films that were like Academy Award considerations. So,
dude, that's great, man. Yeah, you were saying you also had a Dove nominee yourself or something.
Yeah, a few projects I worked on. I did a record that was signed to David Foster, a group called Plus One. That was a Warner Brothers act. That was a kind of a Christian boy band.
Nice. That's funny, actually.
That maybe around 2000, late 90s, early 2000s. And then a couple gospel records I worked on.
Which ones?
Got nominations. There's a group of 5 a.m. Praise that's like an urban gospel group.
Okay, cool.
And I did some stuff with, I'm going to space on her name now. I have a couple producer friends who are big in like the Southern Christian pop market.
Okay.
I can't think of any of their names right now, but a few.
Yeah, I got a buddy actually who was doing some big records here in Nashville, and he was like, dude, it's funny. He's like this Jewish guy, and he's like working with all these Christian artists and shit. What's his name? His name's Russ. What's his last name? Russell Brand? No, Russell. Fuck. Do you know what's his name? Russell Wolf. Russell Wolf. Do you know him?
I don't.
I don't know, but he was doing the fucking some big records out here, and he told me some shit like that. Apparently, he'd been doing this shit in Nashville for like 7 years, and he lives in like the nice part of Nashville and shit. And he walks into a session one day, and they just say, "Hey," their manager, the artist manager, comes up to him in the studio and is like, "Hey, we're actually deciding to no longer continue with you." He's like, "What are you talking about? We've been working together for like 3 years." They're like, "Yeah, they just don't like that you're Jewish."
I mean, like any artist, like
it's kind of fucked up.
It could be a racial issue, it could be a religious issue, it could be whatever, but we're all in it for the creative reasons. And I've worked on a ton of Christian artists or gospel artists or whatever. That's not the world I grew up in, but I understand, the concept of faith and good music is good music.
Yeah, no, I was like, man, it's kind of fucked up. They just axed you, man, for being Jewish.
That's not very Christian of them, right?
Yeah, like, man, it's kind of fucked up, man. Shit. Yeah,
I worked on a record I've done several records for this group that was a Christian duo, the two guys, and they were obviously gay when I worked with them.
Sure.
And they were going around the country doing all the big churches, and it was independent stuff, but they were selling, 100,000 records a year independently because they were performing at mega churches.
Oh, wow.
And then finally they came out and said, you know what, we're gay and we're proud of it and we're Christian.
Like for each other.
I don't think it hurt them.
No, probably not. No, I mean, if they're selling that many records, it's like, who cares of that? I mean, they're probably getting played on mainstream radio at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't listen to Christian radio, but they were definitely big in that world. And there was a time where there's there's always a time, but there's a stigma around that, and then there's time where people are more accepting, and
Yeah.
depending on who the next president is, it'll go back that way.
Yeah, fair enough, I guess, huh? Shit, man. I don't even want to go down that road. It's like I don't even know if I'm gonna have like any music's gonna be going on after that shit, man. I don't know. After November, it's like, where the fuck is this train going here?
It's dark time for sure,
It
for
is,
sure.
yeah, man. Well, I mean, obviously,
I would imagine Nashville is kind of on the fence. Like, it's probably a lot of.
What were we gonna say?
It's probably a lot of country artists support Trump and.
Oh yeah, no, Nashville's a pretty blue city, but the rest of it is pretty conservative. So it's kind of a balance. I mean, like I'll be honest with you. I'm not like, super like on that, SJW train, I guess you could call. I'm just staying my lane, but I'm like, shit, man. Like some of the people here though are just like, all I see is like, I don't know how it's gonna go, to be honest with you. I mean, it is a lot of like sort of the similar LA vibe. I do feel like this, like, Nashville's probably like what Hollywood would have been like in the 80s or something. Like, people are like very, definitely into their creative, like, whatever the fuck. But they're also like, people are excited about music here still, it seems like. It's not like LA where it's just like all industry,
right.
Whatever the fuck. But then, yeah, like, you got all these country artists that are like totally like driving huge trucks and like going to the shooting range and shit.
There'll always be that in the South, but yeah, Nashville over the last, I've been watching it over the last 30 years, and it's been steadily moving towards a more cosmopolitan side of the South and into like a big city like Atlanta did, where it became a big city, and Atlanta's like LA of the South, and Nashville it's its own thing, but it really has become a huge community and grown up so much over the last 20 years as a modern record making,
Yeah, there's still a lot
powerhouse.
of big studios here, and I mean, obviously, like, this is a home studio in a basement, but it's like everyone's got that going on. I feel like a lot of more DIY in Nashville, like, because it's just affordable to live here,
And there's more players, real players.
Yeah, there is a lot more players out here for sure, but I do kind of miss like the industry status quo, because I felt like everyone in LA, at least, like, I don't know, man, even like going out and doing business stuff, it was like I can go to a restaurant and no one's gonna bother me in LA.
Right.
Like, don't talk to me. I just want to eat and talk to whoever I'm with. And like, here it's like, just, they don't get it, and also like with performing and stuff, like, it's not the same status quo. Like, you show up and like, you better know your shit or you're fucked. Like, you're not ever gonna get called, like, you're an embarrassment to our society. Pretty much, and like, here it's like, I wouldn't say it's the same thing, but it's more chillax, and people are like, it's just not the same. Like, people don't dress up as much here, like, for performances, like my band does, but we're from LA, so it's like, you get it, and it's like, I don't know, so it's just kind of a different lifestyle choice, I guess.
But the studio world moves fast there. Like, records get done.
Yeah,
they do the 3-hour sessions, and you do try to get a song done every 3 hours or more, and it's more of like a union shop kind of feel in that regard. But the players come to get stuff done.
Yeah,
and LA doesn't tend to have that kind of time pressure.
I guess you're right, because LA is always a hang, huh? When you're in the studio, it's like, yeah, we'll just get it done, get some coffee.
Yeah, I almost never, unless it's a very specific project, I would almost never say like, okay, I'm going to get, I need a guitarist to come in, and I only want to book you for 3 hours because we got to knock out 2 songs.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, well, let's just plan on the day and we'll see what we get done. And if we want to spend 2 hours finding a sound, let's do that. Like, let's not plan on a rush.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same thing though. Like, usually people in LA doing that kind of thing, like, have the budget to back that kind of time too. Like, I don't know if Nashville's the same in terms of their budgets for recording. If it's like, we need to get this done because like there's so many indie artists here that have such a small budget. It's like, we're just trying to do this now, But
also the cost of living is lower enough there that the budgets don't have to be what they are here.
Yeah, I guess you're right, huh? Yeah, that's fair
I mean,
enough.
I have a couple of people that I know in Nashville, like mixers who mix like 600 songs a year, 1,000 songs a year.
Wow.
And I'm going like that's you never get a breath at
Yeah,
that point.
that's a lot, man. I
Like,
mean, how
where's
many
the
songs?
creativity in that?
That just well, that's okay. So that's kind of like that is the culture here, like, and that's sort of how live shit is. Like, people just show up to get it done. Like, they don't put any like soul. Like, they have like all these dudes on Broadway and Music Row, like playing these gigs, and they're all just like these guys that like live on that street, basically, like to play like for tips, and they're just like, yeah, man, I got like my Nashville number system down, and I'm just
Right.
gonna show up and play Hotel California in whatever key you want me to play it in tonight, and tomorrow it'll be in something else with a different band of people that I've never met before. And they're just like, yeah, I just need to get it done. Like, it is like that. It's just like, exactly what you're saying. Like, there's no creativity in it. It's just like, yeah, we just need to make the money. You
And
know?
I mean, there's great records coming out. I can't fault that at all. But that's not. I don't necessarily want to get into that aspect of churning it out.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. It's not fun if you have to do that. You know?
Would I love to pay half my rent? Yeah.
So you're not leaving California then, like everyone else is, I take it.
Not anytime soon. I mean, we'll see. It was 115 in Burbank this weekend.
Holy crap, man.
So, if it starts getting warmer, I'm going to be up in Toronto soon.
Oh man, jeez. Yeah, when the whole
Yeah.
state's burning down, so that doesn't really help. I don't know. All my other friends are leaving, man. Like all the one, like, and they got, man. One of my friends lives in like a high rise in downtown, and he's just like, he's done, man. Like, he
Yeah,
was,
downtown is hurting because nobody is working in offices right now.
yeah,
And people like you, we were talking about at the very beginning. I get so much more done not going to my studio. I moved my Pro Tools rig and my monitors home, and
yeah,
I can sit here and work. I work a couple hours in the morning, have lunch, take my dog for a walk, come back in, work for a couple more hours, and all of
yeah,
a sudden my song is done. Where
yeah,
instead of having to go, like, I got to drive, park in the parking lot, figure out what I'm going to order for lunch, and
yeah,
it's not like a day at work. It's a day of getting stuff done.
yeah,
So everybody who works in these high rises downtown in these office buildings is getting more done at home, and the companies aren't really eager to get people back in the office.
yeah,
And LA is like, the restaurants and bars are starving.
yeah,
The infrastructure is falling apart, and all these people who moved there in the last couple of years because it was kind of livening up,
yeah.
it's kind of not livening up now.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people say that it was like starting to get better or something, or
Yeah. 20 years ago, nobody wanted to live downtown, and the last 5 years, it's become like a cool place to be.
yeah, fair
But
enough.
I think this weekend they opened up, like, LA Live, and the malls and stuff opened up. So
No,
maybe now that people can actually start getting out and hanging out socially again,
yeah,
if it stays open, then it'll
shit, I know.
kind of kickstart things again. But Hollywood looks like
It's
Escape from
dead.
New York.
Really?
And there's tents on up and down Hollywood Boulevard, on the side streets.
Shit.
All the stores are boarded up. They all have steel shutters down.
Wow.
It's kind
That's
of
terrible. That's depressing.
yeah.
That's what Joe was telling me. He's like, dude, it's just a war zone in Hollywood right now. He's like, don't even go.
Yeah. My studio's on Hollywood Boulevard, kind of across from the school, and it's like Scientology is boarded up with plywood.
What?
Like, it looks like the building is just dilapidated.
Scientology is?
Yeah.
Where are they staying, man? I thought they all live there or some shit.
Yeah, they don't leave. They're
Oh,
still locked. They just locked them in. I have a great picture. I don't have it on this computer, but there was one of the protests on Hollywood Boulevard. There was like 50,000 people between Highland and Cahuenga in that, like, 4 blocks,
right.
just packed on Hollywood Boulevard. And I have a picture of a drone shot of the top of my studio building with this crowd of people in front of it.
Oh, crap. You're like, I'm not going there today.
Like, wow, I can't believe, like,
Yeah.
that's going on right now.
Wait, which one was your studio if it was that close?
It's in a little kind of a patio off of Hollywood Boulevard, but it's right
I know
on.
exactly where that is. Yeah, dude. Is there a record shop like right?
Exactly.
Yes, dude. I know exactly where that is. I did not know that was a studio.
Yeah, it's in that little patio area.
Oh man, yeah, that guy was kind of a cocksucker though when I walked in there.
The record store. Oh, that guy's he's a good guy.
Oh, man, I don't know, man. When I went in there, he's just trying to one up me on everything. He's like, "You have this record, you have this." I'm like, "No, dude. Like the shit you're trying to sell me this record for like $70. Of course, I don't fucking have it, man." He'd be like, "Man, oh," he's like, he was like starting to name drop like all these people that come into his store. I'm like, "Cool, man. Like everyone, like oh, everyone goes to every record store here." But
He is
anyways,
part of Hollywood, though. That guy, Kevin, is he like when he says he knows Spike Lee, he does know Spike Lee.
no, I bet I believed him because he had some crazy shit there. Like he had like some Pink Floyd poster that was signed by the band from the band, like to him personally. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It was like from
that store's been there for more than 40 years, I think.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what he was saying. He's like, yeah, man, this is all the guys in Floyd gave me this poster. I'm like, oh shit.
And he supplies records for all the movies that need like old records and stuff. Whenever they're like somebody sitting around going through their old record collection, whatever, it's all his records that he gives them. So
he's got a gig going. He's good.
Yeah, he's and like Dr. Dre will call him and say, I need 500 pieces of vinyl that nobody else has, like jazz recordings or whatever.
Okay, that's nice.
And he'll find that stuff for him.
Yeah, I did a gig at Dr. Dre's house actually like a year ago.
Which house?
The one in Brentwood Heights.
Nice.
It has like have you been to that one? It has like a moat around it and shit.
No.
Oh, that was kind of tight, but I didn't like work with him. I just did like a party thing at his house, but it was interesting. A lot of celebrity profile personnel going on, but
yeah, he's made that leap from artist to record executive to billionaire.
Yeah, man. No, yeah, he's done well, man. But before we wrap stuff up, I was gonna ask like, what's your favorite record you've ever worked on?
So, okay, my answer to that question is always the same. It's not like there's music that's cool, there's records that are successful, but the records that mean the most to you are the records that usually where everybody in the room felt it was special at the moment, and it was one of those, there's a few times in your life where you go like, wow, if I never get to do that again, if I never get to make another record again, that this was worth it, kind of thing.
Wow.
And probably one of the best records was in the late 90s. I was working with Aaron Neville, and at the time he was probably in his mid 60s already, and he was on A&M, and that's how we got hooked up with him. And he came to the studio the first day, and it was at our house. We had a studio, like one bedroom was the control room, one bedroom was the vocal booth kind of thing. And at night we took our beds out, right? And he came in and he's like, yeah, I just want to chill with you guys here. This is great, right? Let's just order food in and just work here. Let's not go to a studio. And he brought books of poetry that he wrote from the time he was like a little kid in Catholic school.
Wow.
And he was like, I wrote this poem based on, something that we learned in Catholic school when I was 10, and I want to make it into a song.
Wow.
And so, there were like four of us working with him, and we would take his poetry, and this guy, Gordon Chambers, who was a songwriter, singer, lyricist guy, would write it into a song, take his words and write them into a song, and we would build the track around it. And we got to go in the studio with a full orchestra and with his son playing piano on the record, Ivan Neville, who was also at that moment doing really well as an artist.
Wow.
And just watching like the legend Aaron Neville in the studio with his glasses on his nose, like in my bedroom, reading the song we just wrote, recording it, right? And going like, wow, doing that every day for like 2 months.
Wow.
Going like, wow, this is a special record. And not that it's the most, like, it's not my favorite record to listen to. And it is because of the feeling I get about the record. But musically, it's very much of its time. It sounds like a mid-90s R&B record that's trying to make, a star of the day sound a little more modern. And it was kind of forced in a way. But that experience of realizing the art that way, rather than going like, okay, let me pull up a cool beat. Okay, let's my Lambo, whatever the cool phrase of the day is. It wasn't that kind of record.
Okay, fair
It's a
enough.
different kind of thing. And there's other records I've done where they're just really somebody's art that they want to get out in some way. And they're commercial records still, but it's not a boy band record. It's not a K-pop record. It's not a, just let's go in the studio and bash out the next top 40 hit kind of thing.
Wow.
I had a record about 2 months ago that I worked on that I did with a writer producer, the guy who actually I moved out to LA to work with originally in the 90s. I still work with him a lot, and he's more of a songwriter producer these days than he was an artist at the time. And we did a project together that was for songs for TV and film, just placement. And one of the songs that we did got placed in a movie, and on its own, it went to #1, like global viral song on Spotify.
Wait, what song is it?
#1. It was a song called I See Red by Everybody Loves an Outlaw.
Wow, okay.
And it was never meant for that. It was just a song we wrote because we wanted to do a bunch of cool dirty country songs, like kind of like slide guitar, blues rock kind of songs. And we did a project of 4 or 5 songs like 2 years ago, and they got placed by music placement companies. And this one was so well liked, like the scene it was in the movie got 1 billion TikToks, and it has
holy crap,
35 million views on Spotify, and just going like, wow, it hit #5 on the Billboard charts with no record company, no support besides just fans liking the song and passing it around.
Dude, that's awesome.
And the artist wound up getting a record deal out of it, and now we're making the new record for them. But
dude, that is sick.
Those are good experiences that kind of go like, okay, it is real.
Yeah.
It's not about payola. It's not about, buying commercials and buying bus benches. And this just happened on its own.
Wow. No, that is the beauty of the music industry right there. That's like the real thing. That ain't the fake shit. Let's manufacture it, man. That's some legit.
And 2 or 3 times a year, I'm lucky enough to work with a label that's an audiophile record label that prints vinyl and like super audio CDs. They don't sell like iTunes stuff. And they cool. They choose a style, like we're going to do a Latin jazz record, and they let me choose the songs. I choose the musicians, I find the studio, I produce it, engineer it, and mix it. And it's all purist music. There's no tuning, there's no processing. Everything is, we do 3 takes of a song and go, okay, that's the take, let's use that, and we're going to mix it. Crap. And they're about as pure a record as you could do in the modern world.
Wow, dude, that is so sick.
And those are fun. Again, they're not the most, like, I love to hear a cool top 40 record.
No, it's just fun to make, though.
They're fun to make, great musicians, and you listen to it and it's a different experience.
Wow, no, that does sound really fun, man.
So for me, I mean, you could see by the records I worked on, I'd rather do everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of have. Yeah, you kind of have done like every genre of music, really. I mean, I get it's kind of expected, though. I guess if you've been doing this for as long as you have, you would have gotten around to everything.
There are people who are, I do trap, I do, urban music.
But you've kept yourself like in the game though with doing everything. I mean, if you do just trap, like when's trap gonna die? I mean, what's your gig?
Right. Then you come out with your own brand of headphones. But it is a different world. It's a world now where producers and artists are there to build their brand in that moment.
Yeah.
Like if Rihanna never came out with another record, she'd still be a star for the rest of her life.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It's not about those songs anymore. I mean, when's the last time you even heard, Pwn to Replay or Umbrella or one of those records that was huge for her?
Yeah,
it's not that long ago.
It kind of just gets cycled out like really quick too with all these pop artists. It's like one and done. Like one day it's huge. Like even that Cardi B song, what was her first single? That one didn't even really get played that much anymore.
Right, and she's now a movement, right? She's her own thing. So
yeah, unfortunately,
it's a little different. She's going to save America.
Yeah, no, I was like, damn it.
It's a different world. So today, the game of being an artist, just like being an influencer on YouTube or whatever, is about getting your moment, becoming a celebrity, and the celebrity is what your fame is now. Like the Kardashians, it's not about anything. It's just about them being famous.
Oh, geez, when you say it
So
like that, it is like completely soul crushing. But it's
it'll
true.
change again too, though. That's the one thing you can be sure of. It'll be different in 5 years or 10 years or whatever.
Well, last question then. Um, just where do you think it's going? Like, where do you think the music industry's headed at this point, man?
I think we're in a good place. I think that, especially, like, I think this lockdown has been really healthy. I think there's so much creativity going on. I think the world is going to be super hungry when things open up again.
Yeah.
Like when the US opens up again, whether it's the spring or next summer when concerts really get into full swing,
Right.
we're going to see sold out concerts everywhere because people are going to be so hungry to get out again and do that stuff. And artists will have had a chance to reset. Right. I
Yeah.
think a band, imagine like your band puts out a record this year that you
Yeah.
spent the lifetime of your band, whether it's the last 2 years or 5 years, making a record. You put it out, there's your record, you get some attention, you go on tour, you do interviews, and then
Right.
all of a sudden, okay, oh man, we got to put another record out. It's been a year. And
Yeah.
then you have 2 months to make your next masterpiece, right?
Right.
And everybody's kind of in that race. And now we've had 6 months of just, you can't do that. You can't go out and do shows. You can't, you might be able to play Jimmy Kimmel and do a Zoom show, but you can't, it's not the same rat race. So
Yeah.
it's time for the real artist to sit down and go like, oh, I've got a month just to sit and try new things and nobody has to hear them even.
Yeah. Oh,
So
fair
it's a
point.
really healthy time. I think the streaming thing has to figure itself out.
Yeah.
It's depressing seeing the guys from Spotify becoming the richest guys in the world and the artists aren't making money on it.
Yeah. Well, I
There's
mean,
a
even
better.
that, and then there's live stream stuff. I don't know. That is depressing too. Just watching bands like try to rock out when everyone's sitting at home on their phone. I'm like, man, it just doesn't. It's not the same, you know.
Yeah, but I think they'll figure that out. There's a way for that, and that's never going to go away now.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right too, and it's gonna make people more money probably.
Yeah, have you seen the like Broadway is doing shows now where you can buy tickets to a show and it's a Zoom performance, but then they have breakout rooms and you can meet with, one of the actors after the show and it's just you and 5 other people and the actor and you get to hang out, after the show over
What?
Zoom. And
Wow, I've not
so
seen
it's
that.
more of it's a different kind of experience. It's not, you're not in the live theater with everybody, but you're also getting other benefits out of it.
Fair. Yeah, Metallica is
So
doing that like drive-in tour or whatever. That's gonna make them a ton of money.
yeah, and it's just a different, it's a different way. I mean, imagine 2 years ago if you said everything's going to be video conferencing, you'd be like, no way. I mean, since I was a kid in the 80s, the dream was to have a video phone, right?
Yeah.
And nobody really wanted it. It was just kind of a cool idea from the Jetsons or whatever. And
Fair enough.
now we have to do it. We don't have a choice. Like I've never used FaceTime on my phone. I've never turned it on. I don't ever want to
Really?
use FaceTime. I don't want, if I want to talk to somebody, I either want to text them or have a quick phone call.
Yeah.
But
Fair
with Zoom,
enough.
you don't really have a choice. And we couldn't be doing this any other way right now.
No, you're right. Yeah.
So it kind of forced everybody into that, and it works, and it's fine, and everybody lived through it, and it's
Fair enough, man.
it's a
No, I
good
like
thing.
it. That's probably the most optimistic point of view I've heard from anyone that I've had on the podcast, to be honest. Everyone else is just like, yeah, we're fucked.
Well, if you want to get into climate change and world politics, we are fucked. But as far
No, I
as
mean, but yeah, but I feel like everyone mostly in the live field, is like just real down on their luck, Like a lot of my friends that are moving out of LA are just like, yeah, I never thought I was going to move out of LA, and now I'm moving out of LA somewhere else, like Texas or Nevada.
yeah, and that's also, I think, a good thing that spread it out again. Everything doesn't have to be centralized, and LA, just like Nashville is going to go through this too, got too big for its britches, right? Like the cost of
Yeah.
living is too high, rents are too high. There's no reason for that. If you're not going to raise minimum wage, you can't raise rents.
Yeah.
And Nashville, I don't know if you've been following it, but with the Home Studio Act finally passed.
No, I did not know that. So we're legal now. Now I can have this.
I'm not sure what the hoops you have to jump through to be legal are, but you are allowed now to have home studios, even though everybody's been doing it forever anyways. But it was
Such a stupid rule, man. Yeah.
LA went through that in the 80s as well, and
Oh, wow.
it's hard on the big studios, but the big studios are either they're gone or the ones that remain are never going to go away because they're the only places that can do that.
Oh wow,
if
fair
you
enough.
need to record 30 string players, you're not going to do that at somebody's home studio.
Yeah, no way.
So or if you need 100 input console, or if you need a certain drum room or whatever, there's very few people who have those at home. So, but it's a reset, and this pandemic is going to force people to look at labor laws and maybe unions again, and fair wages, and all that stuff is going to hopefully come back around into the consciousness, just like it did in the 1920s, and after the robber barons ran the coal age, industrial age.
Yeah.
So if we can get through it.
Yeah, no, I totally
past
agree.
the tipping point.
Yeah, it's seriously, there's not bloodshed in the streets here. Yeah, totally. Just get back to normal, and love to record some records, man.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I mean, in Nashville, everybody's got a gun. In LA, hopefully, people don't have guns.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, in Nashville, you don't. Yeah, you can't mess down here because they'll just shoot you. I mean, I've actually almost gotten a shot from road rage over here from people. I mean, it was bad in LA, but man, here they're just like quick to fucking, end you. So, but yeah, man. Well, I appreciate having you on today, man. It's seriously.
It's good to be here.
No, yeah, seriously, man. I could just listen to you fucking talk and shit. Cause I'm like, you got so much shit, man. I'm like, fuck, it's fucking dope, dude. You've had a whole career, man. So
don't make me feel old.
No,
I have friends who are still doing it who are 25 years older than me, so don't make me feel old.
Oh no, man. But like shit, you just like you. I can't even get to all of it. Like it's great, man. That's awesome. So I appreciate having you on, man. Do you have any advice to any young producer kids just trying to do this, or get their foot in the door now?
No, I mean, I guess the only advice I would say, and it's never really changed, is you just got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You got to be out there, as much as you can, collaborate as much as you can, whether it's through people you meet on Bandcamp or SoundCloud, or if you can go to live events. But the more people the more you build your network, the more likely you are to have real things happen. And
right.
And like this, just you have to be prepared when the moment strikes.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what your first job is going to be, and then all of a sudden you have an opportunity, and if you could take advantage of that, that's your stepping stone.
Yeah.
But if the opportunity arises and you're like, oh, I never thought about doing this thing, whatever it is, whether it's your first live sound gig or your first studio gig or doing an arrangement for a song or tracking someone else's vocals or whatever it is, like you just have to be willing to do it, or whatever it is that you want to do.
100%, man. Well, that's
I told my nephew when he went away to college last week, like, don't say no to anything.
Yeah, I would agree, man. So. No, I mean, that's kind of true, though. I mean, I guess that's how. I mean, yeah, you just got to take literally anything until it sticks. I guess always show up.
Because you're going to learn something. It's my belief in the world is that the journey is the reward, right? The journey is what it's all about.
Yeah, so no, I
just
totally agree.
Keep moving forward, and you're in good shape.
Well, cool, man. Well, I appreciate having you on, and I hope that we can fucking, I don't know, shoot the shit again. I mean, you got
of course.
Shit. I don't know. We'll talk about. I don't know.
It's epic times.
Yeah, seriously, man. Well, it's been a pleasure, my man.
Cool, my pleasure.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. Well, we'll talk soon, and send me all your social links. I don't know if you have any Instagram, well, not Facebook. I don't fucking do that, but Twitter, Instagram.
I locked everything down this year. I think I had some. That stuff is. I don't want to get into it.
I know it's toxic. I know it's fucking terrible, but I have to do it to
make
money.
Agree. There's a use for it. I've been staying away from it, and it's worked out okay for me. So.
No, I took a year off actually, like last year or a year and a half almost, man. No social media, and it was like life changing. But I totally understand. But either way, I'll plug you on something. Or maybe I'll plug your website. How about that? I'll plug the website.
Sure.
Get some traction there.
All right. That way.
All right.
Cool, Serge. It's good talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. You have a good night.
All right, you too. See ya.
Peace.